Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is February 5, 2022, and a little bit of trivia. It is the 2-year anniversary of my setting up this YouTube channel. I don't think that I uploaded the first video on this date, but I did set up the YouTube channel, and then I think that the first video came a little bit later in the month. But anyway, the channel has been around for 2 years, and we still have a long way to go, but solid first 2 years of building this thing. All right, so in this video, we're going to be doing a commentary on a Russell Brand video. Yeah, so this guy was an actor involved with Katy Perry for a while, and apparently he has a YouTube channel with almost 5 million subscribers, where he is doing absolutely horrible right-wing contrarian nonsense, sort of dressed up with like a new age hippie veneer. Just fucking trash. Specifically, in the video in question that we're going to be commenting on, Brand is basically promoting the FluTrucksKlan, the Canadian Freedom Convoy 2022 of obnoxious right-wing anti-vax truckers who are making their way across the frozen North Country, pissing everyone off as they go. I know that a couple of people have actually suggested Russell Brand videos for Sockdem Gang. He's not even really in the Sockdem Gang. This is like Libertarian Gang or something. Anyway, he has a huge channel, like I said, and I have gone to his channel in the past after people suggested, and I've looked for something that I might want to comment on, and just never really found anything. It's a pretty bad channel. Thanks, though, to fellow YouTuber One Dime for recommending this particular video and making that suggestion. I think that this is actually an important topic, and I've been covering COVID a lot, so it's relevant. So where do we even begin with this particular situation? Here's a Twitter thread from Caroline Or Bueno, PhD. Yes, I do want to do some background before we get to the video because it just makes it all that much more juicy and delicious that Brand just didn't lift a finger to check out what he was reporting on, or if he did, it even worse. But anyway, Twitter thread, Caroline Or Bueno, PhD, at RVA Wonk, participants in the far-right anti-vaccine truck convoy in Canada. And first of all, let's pause there. Are they far-right? Yes, the anti-vax movement is a far-right movement. It has existed for as long as vaccines have existed, and you can tell at a glance from the sheer quantity of MAGA paraphernalia, the Confederate flags, the Gadsden flags, and yes, even some Nazi flags, as well as the far-right ties of the organizers, although we're going to get to that in a minute. Back to the thread, participants in the far-right anti-vaccine truck convoy in Canada claimed that they couldn't find restaurants to serve them, and at one point, one of the organizers suggested going to homeless shelters to take food meant for those who need it. And they did so. Absolutely shameful. We have the retweet there. This is from the Shepherds of Good Hope, Ottawa. Hi, everyone. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Earlier today, our staff and volunteers experienced harassment from convoy protesters seeking meals from our soup kitchen. The individuals were given meals to diffuse the conflict. Basically, they're just like, get out of here, and probably feared that they were going to become unruly. I don't know if threats were made to that effect, but we will see some of the behavior of these people in a video in just a minute. Management was then informed of the issue and no further meals were given to protesters. Our soup kitchen is committed to providing meals to people experiencing and at high risk of homelessness in Ottawa. This weekend's events have caused significant strain to our operations at an already difficult time. Charming. So, whatever your politics, that's bad PR. But I think that that's basically who these people are. Anyway, on to the next tweet in the thread. The far-right anti-vaccine truck convoy also drew condemnation from a huge swath of Canada today after participants parked their cars on hallowed ground and climbed all over the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. There's a retweet there with a video. I don't have the video here, but it said, after explaining to these less than fine Canadians of the hallowed grounds upon which they trode, this was their reaction in the name of freedom. So, again, I think that this is just who they are. self-obsessed right-wing assholes. No social consciousness whatsoever, and of course, hypocritical about the patriotic values that they supposedly uphold. So, on to the next tweet. The participants, self-professed patriots, used the National War Memorial as a temporary parking lot. The tweet there from Jim Watson, Ottawa. Ottawa police have confirmed that cars parked on the grounds of the National Cenotaph have been removed. Parking on this sacred ground that includes the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was a sign of complete disrespect. So, again, to the convoy, if you're trying to get the support of, whatever veterans and whatever, quote, true Canadians on your side or whatever, you're definitely doing it wrong. But again, I think this is just who they are. Continuing. Participants in the far-right anti-vaccine truck convoy also reportedly harassed a bunch of employees at local businesses and hotels, as well as journalists covering the event. I grabbed one of these. This is from @CharmaineKB16. This happened at a friend's workplace an hour ago here in Ottawa. Guy then came back in and physically assaulted the hotel owner. Fuck anti-maskers and fuck this convoy. #Karen Convoy. #FluTrucksKlan. So yeah, the video is just the guy yelling in an entitled way, and I don't know what the physical assault was, but it's exactly the kind of fucking ignorance on parade that you would expect. Just this sort of antisocial hostility, condensed into a political ideology, I guess. Continuing the thread, they also tried to assault this journalist and ended up hitting his cameraman with a full can of beer. Retweeting @EvanL Solomon. Seconds before I was doing my hit for @CTV News Channel, a guy in the crowd drilled a full beer can at me and just missed, but hit our camera gear. The guy then took off. So things are getting more angry. I could use a drink, but not like this. Some other highlights. This is from @AdamLockett, 2Ts34. The City of Ottawa and Ottawa Police will remove houseless people from encampments, citing, quote, safety concerns, but will allow the FluTrucksKlan to illegally stockpile explosive material and build an encampment with semi-permanent structures. And then citing a CBC News article from a couple of years ago about how an Ottawa homeless encampment was dismantled over those kinds of concerns. Another major stir was caused as the Freedom Convoy has not exactly been super respectful towards some of the Indigenous nations. So here's a tweet from Andre Baer, #FreedomConvoy2022, desecrating our drums and songs, yelling yabba dabba doo to pretend like they have support from Indigenous nations. Condemn this now. Here's the video. So yeah, clearly, these people are not the products of a system promoting mindless individualism and ignorance and disrespect for other cultures, particularly those that Canada was established on top of and by dominating. No. These are, strong free thinkers. Come on. You don't wind up in a situation like that when you're really thinking for yourself. You do it because you're the ignorant product of a system that is using you to just do a land grab. Anyway, there were other videos being circulated of convoy protesters saying that various Indigenous nations had, given them gifts and had done ceremonies, etc. However, to the extent that this is true at all, it was not done in an official capacity and was publicly condemned by Indigenous groups such as FSIN, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, put out this statement on February 3rd. We strongly oppose the actions and tactics of the Freedom Convoy protesters, some of whom have been openly sharing ignorant acts of cultural appropriation of First Nations culture and spirituality, publicly and online. We condemn such open acts of racism and ignorance, which are being committed across our traditional treaty territories. Quote, our First Nations communities have been some of the hardest hit since the beginning of the pandemic. We've been working tirelessly to distribute PPE and supplies to our First Nations because we are highly vulnerable to COVID-19. Our families and communities have suffered insurmountable losses because of this horrible virus, and our First Nations chiefs have implemented some of the strictest protocols in the country to keep their membership safe, says FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron. Quote, this convoy is an insult to our chiefs, our communities, and to the hundreds of loved ones we've lost through this pandemic. Not only are these protesters risking lives and spreading false information, but they're also disrespecting our traditional drums, pipes, and medicines. It's a disgrace to see our culturally sacred items being used improperly, without proper protocol, in support of anti-vaccine protests. There was another statement pictured here from February 2nd from other Indigenous groups saying basically the same thing. Quote, the actions that are taking place on our territory, Ottawa, Ontario, is unacceptable. For those who are participating in these actions, the Algonquin Nation does not support the setup of a teepee, the pipe ceremony, and a sacred fire in Confederation Park in support of the Freedom Convoy. The Algonquin Nation did not give consent for these ceremonial practices and could cause more harm to who we are as a First Nations Algonquin people. First Nations and non-Indigenous people should always remember protocol and that permission from us is needed to proceed, unquote. So that's about the things that actually happened. But then some of the protester supporters have been stooping even lower to share an old video that they say is in support of the Freedom Convoy. However, that's debunked in a Reuters article here from January 27. Fact check, video of Indigenous group is not related to 2022 Freedom Convoy. Social media users are sharing a video of an Indigenous group in Canada and claiming that it shows a drum ceremony in support of the 2022 Freedom Convoy in support of truck drivers who are anti-vax. The video, however, is years old. So, the protesters are like, no, it's legit. Look, here's what they don't want you to know. Yeah, actually, they're just sharing an old video that has absolutely nothing to do with support for the convoy at all. So what do you think? Just your average, true Canadians, quote unquote, your average Nazi flag flying, Confederate flag flying, MAGA paraphernalia having true Canadians, going through Canada, shaking down soup kitchens for free meals, chucking beer cans at bystanders from their trucks, being openly mocking towards Indigenous people, putting their own quote-unquote personal freedoms above everyone else's public health and safety. Yeah, this sounds like pretty typical conservative far-right behavior. So on that note, the last item before we get into the brand video, screenshot here is from Wikipedia. There are about a dozen citations just off of this section alone. Too many to cover individually unless this video is going to be 2 hours long. But this is from the Freedom Convoy 2022 page, specifically the links to far-right and separatist groups page, and it's food for thought. I did look up a bunch of these articles, and Wikipedia is not always 100% accurate, to say the least. However, you can look up the citations and see whether they actually bear out what's being said. Sometimes people just post stuff that is not supported by any evidence, and then sometimes people post things that are supported by flimsy evidence. In this case, from everything I looked up, it checked out. So I'm going to just read the summary, which is long enough in and of itself. So, point one of the lead organizers of the convoy, James Bauder, has previously stated support for QAnon, endorsed conspiracy theories around the COVID-19 pandemic and the 2020 U.S. presidential election, and called for the arrest of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for alleged, quote, treason. So in the article that supports that line, basically it's just they went to the guy's Facebook page and that's what he posts about and that's what he talks about. That's pretty consistent throughout all of the people who are prominently associated with this thing. It's anti-Muslim stuff, it's anti-immigrant stuff, edging into the more overt white supremacist neo-Nazi type of stuff. Speaking of, the next point there, the Facebook page for the convoy has shared content from and has listed as an organizer Wexit co-founder and Yellow Vest Canada organizer Patrick King, who has previously hosted counter-protests to anti-racism rallies, spread COVID-19 misinformation, and has spread the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. Let's go to some video of him right now.
Now what it is the part of the depopulation. And a lot of people don't understand what that means, and what there is there's an end game. It's called depopulation of the Caucasian race, or the Anglo-Saxon. And that's what the goal is to depopulate the Anglo-Saxon race, because they are the ones with the strongest bloodlines. And we'll leave it at that, because then we get into a whole different topic. But it's a depopulation of race. Okay, that's what they want to do. I've spoken before about how we have Ahmed Ahmadinejad, or Mahmed. I can't say their names very well because I don't have the dialect that they do, but we have Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who states that no matter what, we are going to infiltrate governments, education systems. We're going to infiltrate every way possible into the Western world. What we're going to do is not only infiltrate by flooding with refugees, we're going to infiltrate the education systems to manipulate it to endorse this kind of behavior. This kind of behavior then endorses less procreation. All right, so the less procreation, the less white people, or, Anglo-Saxon. Let's say Anglo-Saxon, because when I say white, all the Antifa guys call up the race card. So we're going to call ourselves Anglo-Saxon, okay?
But wait, there's more. Look what else you get.
Basically, what we have, okay, is we have a hindrance. There you go, Carrot. Had a family of 10, and now you've only had, I had 2. Came from a family of 10. That's right, I only had 2 as well. I would have loved to have more, but it just, cost-wise, I could not afford it. And for that, that's where we stayed. Now we have these refugees coming in who have upwards of 12. Okay, now the number has beaten us there right away. They have 12 and many wives. So all of that aside, we're looking at some pretty outrageous numbers to look at where we are. Now, when you get into the gay communities, no longer are they procreating, right? They're not procreating. There's man and man, that can't happen. Woman and woman, that can't happen. And then we go as far as mutilating. I'm going to say mutilating our private areas, our genitalia, so that we can't procreate. That is a part of the UN Agenda 2030. That is part of the giant scheme of things. Hi, Cindy.
So remember, we're just on point 2 here. We got several more to go. This is one of your guys. By the way, what is Wexit? They mentioned that he's involved in Wexit, or the West Exit. This is a separatist movement in Canada, which to me seems to have striking parallels to the Northwest Territorial Imperative in the US. The guy who was spouting neo-Nazi talking points in that video I just played is also involved with a movement that basically mirrors on the Canadian side of the border what neo-Nazis in the United States have been trying to do as far as turning the rural northwestern states in the US into, like, an Aryan nation safe zone. Actually, to that effect, I plan to do an article soon, probably next on the channel, about a separatist militia, white supremacist far-right movement that is in Northern California, basically trying to do the same thing, setting up like a new state, etc. So this is what's kind of going on up in that world. If it sounds like it's neo-Nazi shit, it's because it is. So continuing, point 3, the Maverick Party, Tamara Litch, the protests fundraiser, I believe that she is actually the name listed on the GoFundMe, is secretary for the Maverick Party, a Western separatist group formerly known as Wexit Canada. So there you go. Litch was previously the regional coordinator for Wexit in southeastern Alberta and board member for Wexit Alberta. The Maverick Party has denied involvement in fundraising for the convoy, issuing a statement on January 24 saying that the party is not involved in the protest. Actually, if you go in the Wikipedia article, one of the citations here is to the Tamara Litch page on the Maverick Party's website, which seems to have been scrubbed. It now turns up as a 404, file not found error. But if you paste the URL into the Wayback Machine at web.archive.org, it was there like a week ago. So somebody seems to not like publicity. Point 4, Action for Canada, associated with the Canada Unity Group inside the Freedom Convoy, Islamophobic and anti-LGBTQ conspiracy group with web pages about the dangers of, quote, political Islam, health consequences of 5G technology, so we got 5G conspiracy stuff, and underreporting of adverse vaccine reactions. Again, they harp on this constantly, completely ignoring the fact that there's a fucking pandemic going on. Anyway, founded by Tanya Gaw, who actively supported the Yellow Vests protests of 2019. So just a quick note about the Yellow Vests. This is a populist uprising. There is some merit to it, but with anything populist, you gotta watch that it doesn't go right wing, which is, I would say, an inherent danger to anything populist because, populism way back in the day before Marxism was widespread, before the proletariat was especially well developed as a class, like in the 19th century. Okay, you can see the appeal of populism there. Society was still somewhat more agrarian, even in the more advanced countries. However, as time rolls on, the proletariat develops, countries industrialize, etc., it seems that the more populist movements tend to be anti-socialist in character. In other words, after socialism, Marxism has developed as a possibility and a well-known alternative to capitalism. People who are particularly embracing populism over socialism, this is something to watch for. It's usually a sign of anti-communism. And what do we know about anti-socialist, anti-communist, anti-Marxist movements? They're full of fascist, libertarian fucking wingnuts. Now, that's going to differ somewhat from country to country. For example, France, where the Yellow Vest thing specifically started. France has a very long history of mass protest, strikes, demonstrations, which can be more left-wing in character. However, there's also a pretty strong far-right movement. Like in 2016, the election between Macron and Le Pen in many ways mirrored what was going on in the US with Clinton-Trump, where you had the kind of center-right Clinton or Macron in their case, and then the far-right Trump-Le Pen. Now, that's not to say that the entire Yellow Vest movement in France is right-wing or Le Pen supporters. In fact, my point is that because France has more of a history of left-wing mass demonstrations and things like that, mass direct action, probably that's one of the countries least likely where it's completely dominated by the right wing. But then you go to countries like the US and Canada, where the populism is overwhelmingly of a right-wing fascist flavor. What are you going to get when you try to transplant the Yellow Vest movement here? Probably more like that. These are not people we want to be empowering and centering and spotlighting in a positive way. This is also why we need, particularly as socialists, to stand up against any kind of nationalistic, patriotic sentiment, as that term is commonly used in the United States and Canada, and to reject that kind of right-wing fascist populism that is well-funded and gets support from the big bourgeoisie, the more reactionary parts of the big bourgeoisie, and to reject any kind of supposed socialist that is just, oh, Marxism is populism. Somebody threw that at me the other day. I said, no, Marxism is Marxism, and populism is oftentimes anti-Marxist. That's why they're populists, not socialists. I know it's kind of tough for people. You may not enjoy conflict, but you have to actually stand up against fascism, preferably before it's super strong. You don't go around coddling it and trying to make alliances and, oh, let's hear them out. Let's debate our ideas. No. This was settled like a century ago. Stop. It's enough. So anyway, going back to the list of points here, no more lockdowns is point number 5. Jason LaFace, Canada Unity's Ontario organizer for the Freedom Convoy, is also a main organizer for No More Lockdowns Canada, an anti-lockdown and anti-vaccine mandate organization primarily associated with expelled Ontario Member of Provincial Parliament Randy Hillier, which holds anti-lockdown rallies across Ontario. Next, the People's Party of Canada, so we're just talking about populism, there you go. Benjamin Dichter, who is listed as an organizer on the Freedom Convoy GoFundMe page, and who is an organizer of the Freedom Convoy, was a speaker at the inaugural 2019 PPC National Convention, where he claimed that political Islam has infiltrated the Conservative Party and is, quote, rotting away at our society like syphilis, unquote. Now, in my opinion, being conservative is bad enough, but when you feel that the Conservative Party isn't far enough and that, it's been infiltrated by whatever, group that you're scapegoating to punch down at, that's a far-right hallmark. In other words, we got to go super extreme because, the standard Conservative Party has, quote, already been taken over by the Muslims or whatever. Finally, the Soldiers of Odin, best for last. Convoy leader Dave Steenberg, an admin of the Convoy Facebook page, Jason LaFace, so that guy again, the No More Lockdowns, both have posted materials by Soldiers of Odin, a neo-Nazi vigilante group, on their Facebook pages. LaFace was even wearing a Soldiers of Odin jacket. So who are the Soldiers of Odin? They are a group founded in Finland, but it has spread to other countries, including Norway, Sweden, Australia, and Canada, of course. They're an anti-immigrant group. One of the guys who established the Quebec chapter of the Soldiers of Odin was Dave Treggett. He then left to found another anti-immigration group called Storm Alliance. Nazi links there, probably. So what do? Well, they do, quote, patrols. Okay? So you got Nazi vigilantes doing patrols. They show up at anti-LGBT protests. So I hope that we're getting the picture here now about who is involved with the leadership of the Freedom Convoy. I mean, honestly, at this point, just using the word freedom, which is like a buzzword for every sort of right-wing cause that there is. They used to just take liberty. Okay, fine. I mean, that as the word, like liberty. That was their buzzword for, property rights and all that kind of shit. They're just going for, next it'll be liberation. Who knows? But, I mean, honestly, as socialists, obviously, we're for the liberation of people and freedom to have a dignified life, which as a working person, you do not have in capitalism. But capitalism, and not immigrants and not whatever the hell else, LGBTQ plus people, that's not the problem. Capitalism is the problem. All right, so with that said, there's our background on what is this Freedom Convoy 2022, or again, the FluTrucksKlan. Not that COVID is merely the flu, it is just catchy. COVID is obviously much more. Check out our COVID-19 for Socialists playlist or the current events playlist here on the channel for many more videos on the serious danger posed by COVID-19. So now let's get on to this Russell Brand video. And I hope that all this background puts it in the proper light. Oh, actually, there's one thing I forgot to mention. I just wanted to highlight this before we got into the Russell Brand video, and I had a couple of extra resources that I overlooked when I was sharing the statements from the Indigenous nations before. This is a tweet from One Dime. Many Indigenous reserves in Canada don't even have access to clean drinking water. Meanwhile, privileged petty bourgeois conservative chuds are complaining about wearing masks and vaccines. Anyone supporting the Freedom Convoy but not Indigenous people is an idiot or opportunist. And there's a tweet there retweeted from @lefty_mind Shelby from May 17, 2021. While we talk about the colonization of the Palestinian people, it is important to also realize the atrocities and active colonization within our own country. Here is the drinking water on an Indigenous reserve here in Canada. You can see there, I'm not playing the whole video, but the water is clearly a murky gray-brown color. And I'm not talking like slightly tinted, like, oh, there's a, off-tone hue to it. It's basically opaque. I imagine if you tried to run this through a filter, probably just a few gallons would wind up clogging the filter. The conditions faced by Indigenous people on reservations are some of the worst anywhere in North America. The settler colonist governments have, over the centuries, pushed Indigenous people onto smaller and smaller pieces of land. And I say over the centuries, a lot of it really happened in like the last 2 centuries, and even more than that, like the last 150 years. Colonization is an ongoing process. We have several videos on the channel on this topic. Here's another tweet from Christian Big Eagle at Cree Warrior 2010. The photo on the left is how Canada's police respond to violent white supremacists protesting in Ottawa. This is, of course, from a couple of days ago, and it refers to the Freedom Convoy. The cops are there, thumbs up, smiling, happy. As the saying goes, cops and Klan go hand in hand. After all, what are far-right militia groups all about? It's the irregulars, okay? So in an army or the police, you have the regular forces, the ones in uniform with the official training and the official sanction. Then you have the irregulars, who kind of fill in the cracks. When capitalism has a crisis, as it's been having for a while now, and it goes closer and closer to fascism, it needs to draw on additional reserves to protect itself. When the cops aren't enough, and I mean, the cops are plenty, actually the U.S. funds, the U.S. police forces alone are bigger than most countries' militaries, like for external defense. That is how much money is dumped into protecting private property and the capitalist system, and it's still not enough. It's never enough for them because the system is so hated, so unjust, so unfair. They have to just keep beefing it up and beefing it up. And you can see on the right, as the tweet goes on, the two photos on the right are how Canada's police respond to unarmed Indigenous protesters who are defending their land and their rights. And you can see being arrested. If it were the United States, there would probably also be much more lethal force used, as is usually the way. In the US, cops kill about 3 people a day. However, the treatment of the far right usually is quite different. Why? Again, because they are basically the extra police. They're oftentimes cop wannabes who really don't challenge the system of private property in any significant way. That's why capitalists will fund and use fascist movements whenever their system is in danger. And if you don't understand this, don't have a YouTube channel where you talk about such things. On to Russell Brand.
I got trucking on my mind. There's a great big convoy trucking across Canada. Truckers, who were previously regarded as heroes when they were delivering vital goods and working during the lockdown, are now villains as they protest vaccine mandates.
Yeah, it's almost like when people do socially useful things that have actual value for other people, that may be praised. While at the same time, if you go do stupid antisocial things, possibly other people may not be quite as enthusiastic about that.
So why is no one in the mainstream media talking about it?
Yeah, so actually there is kind of plenty of coverage of this. It may not be as favorable as you would like, but it exists. And I think that a fart sounding effect is pretty much a good summary of this video.
Hello there, you 4.7 million glorious wonders. How wonderful that we get to be alive together right now in the world and shape reality according to our conscious will and our divine understanding of what this experience is together. You know what I mean? You know the sort of stuff I say, don't you? What's going on with these Canadian truckers? Look in the comments below. We read the comments. I tell you we read the comments. And the reason we're doing this video is because in the comments, do the truckers, do the Canadian truckers. All right, well, do the Canadian truckers. There's a great big convoy heading across Canada to protest vaccine mandates. When we prepare these videos, we have to find mainstream media content to comment on and to build our content and to help us formulate a perspective so that we can get in a discourse with you. We can't find any about these Canadian truckers, and yet people want to hear about it. So what is going on? And the main questions I have to offer is, how come the truckers go from being heroes one minute when they're delivering vital goods and services to being loathed if they won't participate and capitulate according to the will of the powerful? The answers are probably pretty bloody obvious.
Okay, take a breath there, Russell. So we finally started getting onto a new piece of information between buttering up the audience and everything else. Basically, we've gotten two things so far, and then one new element added at the end. The first thing is nobody is talking about this convoy. I've actually been seeing coverage of this steadily, so I think that this just helps him with the we're being discriminated against, nobody wants you to know about XYZ. It makes the audience feel special. You know, this is an audience with a massive victim complex, and that's exactly what he's playing into. He knows exactly how to do that. So then point two is this like, ooh, big mystery, or, it's a hypocrisy that strangely, I just can't figure it out. When truckers were doing things that were helpful, they were praised. And now that they are in a pandemic, making this big stink about vaccine mandates, now suddenly that is, something that's completely different from delivering goods to places where they're needed, and people are having a different reaction to that. Well, that's not actually mysterious in the slightest. They're two completely different things. The one really doesn't have anything to do with the other. So then he ends on the note of, and why would that be? It's about capitulating to the powerful. And I think we know exactly why. Well, no, wait a minute. So this entire video actually is marked by incredible cowardice of a type I actually really wasn't expecting to see. He repeatedly, russellbrand repeatedly, refuses to take a stance on whether the truckers are right or wrong for doing this. He's just like, well, it's people standing up, and, are they right, are they wrong? This gets pretty twisted, actually, as it goes on. I was pretty shocked, because this guy's entire YouTube channel is like the Great Reset. It's not actually a conspiracy. And microchip in your COVID-19 passport. Like, the entire channel is pretty hardcore right-wing conspiracy trash. Also, the cover here is implicitly extremely favorable towards the convoy, yet he refuses to come straight out and say, yes, I am endorsing what they're doing, when clearly that is what he is saying. But he's trying to dance around it, first of all, as if that's going to fool anyone. You would have to have a very, very small mind not to notice that this is extremely positive coverage. But anyway, the introduction of this last point of like, well, they're standing up to the powerful, because every time that someone stands up to the powerful, it's always in a good way, and it's always helpful, and, no, that's not necessarily true. But that's the way he keeps framing it. Like, that's the only thing important in life. And this is how you run into contrarian populist politics, and you get led around by the nose by, it's like people who go for reverse psychology. Oh, don't do this. You really don't want to. Okay, I'm going to do it. Yeah, when you fall into that, then you think you're being so clever, but really then if somebody wants you to do something, they just have to tell you to do the opposite, and they know that you're very predictably going to do that thing. That's kind of like the territory that we're operating in here. Anyway, let's continue.
Any of you that switched on, and I know you are, you wonderful miracles. So let's have a look at this story using stuff we've had to do ourselves because the mainstream media won't bloody do it for us. While more than 85% of Canada's 120,000 truck drivers who regularly cross into the US are vaccinated against COVID-19, as many as 16,000 could be sidelined as a result of new vaccination restrictions put in place in Canada.
So quick pause here. He's going on about how, the mainstream media won't do it for us, so we had to do it ourselves. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Are you CBN News? Like, it's not like, the russellbrand YouTube channel. So I was like, well, somebody did that isn't you. What the hell are you talking about? I was actually floored by this. CBN News, with that weird little, like, flame or onion logo. I don't know what that is. That's the Christian Broadcasting Network. You know who runs that? Pat Robertson. Like the 700 Club, Pat Robertson, televangelist, far-right fucking religious freak. That's what he's reading from. And yeah, there are other sources available. He did not need to pull that. He chose to.
And by President Joe Biden's administration. Many truckers are protesting in the protest after Canada's January the 15th deadline, forcing unvaccinated drivers to commit to 2 weeks of isolation and submit negative COVID-19 tests before being allowed back into the northern country. In a message posted on the Instagram account, Freedom Convoy 22, the organisers of the convoy said, here are some facts that the media is not sharing. The trucking convoy is not anti-vaccination. It is anti-government mandates.
Okay, pause here. So let's be clear about something. Anti-mandate is simply the new face of the anti-vax movement. That's all it is. It is not anything new, separate, or different. They are the fucking same thing. This is a tactic used by anti-vaxxers for quite a while. It's not new. It's not legitimate. It's not valid. They don't mean it. They're just trying to keep sticking their anti-vax views in under any pretense that they can possibly use to try to bend to their advantage. We're living in a situation now where the vaccines have been out for over a year, and we have plenty of data on their safety. They are overwhelmingly safe. Yes, with any type of medicine, there are going to be some adverse reactions. That is true of literally any type of medicine. But, this like, whatever the guy was going on about, the mass sterilization of the Aryan race or whatever, it's not the case, okay? So these people find themselves on the fringe, and so they have to just keep it going by whatever means, is necessary for them to resort to at any particular stage of this. So the next thing that you're going to hear, that you usually hear from anti-mandate people, are, I'm not anti-vax, I actually got the vaccine. I'm anti-mandate. But why are you anti-mandate? Why? And if you just try to boil this down to, it's freedom, no, I'm sorry, it isn't about freedom. That's just a total last refuge of when you've lost the debate. You just start going to, they're trying to force us to do things. Yeah, you have to stop at a red light. You can try just running it, but there may be social penalties for that. There are mandates all around us. People cannot just do whatever the fuck they want at any given moment in time. That's just a fact of human society. No, it's not about freedom, because when you actually get down to why they're against it, it's the fucking just, half-baked gobbledygook that the guy was talking about before with, like, the UN agenda for the gays and the blah, 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 and the 5G's a conspiracy to cook the birds and, turning the frickin' frogs gay. And, like, when you get down to, like, what is your objection, it's that kind of shit. But they hide it behind freedom, because freedom sounds a lot better than the things they actually believe. And then once they hook somebody in with that, then they start telling them, oh, here's the real deal, guess who controls the banks? It's, pointy noses. And then you have Russell Brand sitting here just acting like this, neutral arbiter of like, I'm just trying to hear people out. Well, let's continue.
Many of us are vaccinated. We simply believe that every Canadian should be free to choose and face no discrimination or restrictions on their freedom due to their choice. No forced vaccination, and yes, it is forced when you choose between a shot you don't want and your ability to feed yourself. Truckers will not block emergency vehicles at any point ever, and will even assist any person in need at any point in the convoy or protest.
Yeah. When they're not too busy chucking beer cans at people and shaking down soup kitchens for free food. So you hear the presentation: discrimination, freedom, choice, forced. It's basically deception by oversimplification. Like, that really isn't the issue, actually. If these were like level-headed, reasonable people who didn't also listen to QAnon and believe every fucking absolute piece of gutter nonsense coming out of their phone screens, maybe then there might be some leeway here. The bottom line is, these aren't reasonable people. They haven't reached these positions due to reasonable considerations. They're, in fact, doing grave injustice to words like discrimination, freedom, choice, and force or coercion. People actually do experience these things in contexts that don't involve being part of the global transportation industry during a pandemic, that actually involve a lot more loss of agency than is being discussed here. They're co-opting these terms and really just bastardizing them for their own perverse neo-Nazi politics. And that's what it is. They can try to hide that all they want. That is basically what is behind this. If you're involved with this and you don't see it, take a step back. Go watch the earlier part of the video again. Look at who is actually organizing this thing. My belief is that the capitalist governments like Canada and the United States should actually be doing a lot more to protect working people from this disease. There's no reason why this needs to keep spreading. It causes a lot of harm to people. What they are doing is not enough, and their strategies aren't that great. But the vaccine mandates are just not the issue that you're making them out to be here. And as they say, if it's truly not about vaccines, then why don't you just have a fucking rally that doesn't reference the vaccines? There's a thought. If it's not about the vaccines, then just have a rally saying we should not have laws and see how far that gets you. You know, if you're just anti-mandate, period, that mandates make no sense in any context, okay, then have a rally about that. But leave the fucking vaccines out of it, if it's not really about the vaccines, as you claim that it isn't. And in fact, it may not be. This may just be a launching pad for Wexit or whatever other white supremacist fucking neo-Nazi nonsense you have cooked up. But just have a rally for that and leave the vaccines out of it.
People who oppose government mandates are not the tiny group that the media has tried to make us believe. We are significant in numbers, growing by the day, and we will not back down. Whether or not you agree with their aims, of course, that's up to you. That's what democracy is, a discourse, a series of opinions being shared, developed, evolved in order to create systems that are fair to as many people as possible. This is precisely what people need to do. You have to work out what your objectives are, work out how you're going to pursue it, make sure you're ideologically sound and that your conduct is fair. The stuff they said about the emergency vehicles, for example, I think that's very important, because you can imagine that the way that this protest would be discredited is, they're getting in the way of emergency vehicles. Because we're dealing with a pretty nefarious machine that will say anything to shut down opposition to its intentions.
So that, to me, is some of that really staggering cowardice that I was talking about before from Russell Brand. He basically here just backs off completely, like doesn't take any responsibility for the actually really positive coverage. He's giving them a lot of cover just by saying, they're just people out there opposing the machine. Isn't that honorable? And yes, whether or not you believe the things that they believe, I mean, they're out there saying it, and who's to say who's right and who's wrong? I mean, well, they're neo-Nazis, so they're probably wrong, right? Yeah? Can you bring yourself to at least say that much? No, of course you can't. You're going to sit there and read from the fucking 700 Club about what's going on. Yeah, that should be a balanced take, don't you think? Staggering dishonesty. Staggering. And it's consistent throughout this entire video, where it's like, this little, mustache chap, this new politician, says the Jews are behind all of our problems. Is he right? Is he wrong? Who can say? But, he's out there fighting the system. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't just say that people with neo-Nazi politics are, just some average Joes standing up to the machine. That's not how it fucking works. First of all, because these people, the most reactionary circles of capital, keep them in their back pockets for when they need them. This is not helpful to other working people at all. And, how steeped Brand's channel is in this stuff, he's got to know it. He's got to know exactly what he's doing.
According to CBC News, more than 1,000 supporters braved dangerously cold temperatures to greet the convoy as it passed through Headingley, Manitoba, en route to Ottawa. Manitoba resident Terry Mannery told the Canadian news outlet the far-reaching government mandates go too far and have sparked devastating cultural divisions.
Okay, so again, Pat Robertson News is telling us that these protesters are braving dangerous temperatures. So that they're brave in the face of danger here. And it's the government whose mandates have gone too far. Well, we can all agree that that happens sometimes. And they are sparking devastating cultural divisions. In other words, they're pissing off the right-wing crazies. Can you believe that the government would do such a thing? The same people who think that, quote, political Islam has infected the conservative party like syphilis. Can you believe the cultural divisions that the government is stoking here? For one, I'm outraged. I can't believe it either. Yes, Russell, tell us what next steps we need to take.
We're tired of too much dividing people, vaxxed people to unvaxxed people, he said. That's not supposed to happen. We're all one. We're all in this together. It needs to stop right now. Oh, Terry Mannery, he's nailed it, hasn't he, really?
No, he really hasn't. And honestly, anybody who thinks that he does is just a laughingstock. What did he nail? He's saying that, first of all, we don't even know what the objections are to the vaccines here. It's just government says that people have to do something. Well, why is it wrong? The government says you have to do things all the time. Why is this one wrong? You haven't made the case. Like I said, they try to say it's not even about the vaccines, it's about the principle. Well, if it's about the principle, why aren't you out there protesting seatbelt laws or, bicycle helmet laws? Why are you making this the stand? And we don't get an answer because the actual answer really is pretty fucking insane. It's not good faith. It's not coming from an honest place. It's coming from the kind of place of, hey, we need to build a white supremacist homeland in the Pacific Northwest. And here's this fucking washed up MTV jock like, wow, we're all one. We're all one. What are you talking about? There's a bunch of right-wingers having a convoy and literally just pissing everyone off that they, whose area they drive through. They're absolutely the last people in society likely to say, Kumbaya, we are all one. They don't actually believe that. But here you are, trying to get people to believe that they do. Why would you do that? The grift just evolves and gets uglier every single day, doesn't it, Russell? Doesn't it? Does it ever bother you, the lengths to which you have to go? The kinds of fucking scum that you have to prop up to keep the money flowing in? Does it ever bother you?
People should be able to come together regardless of differences. And in fact, look at the alternative. If people can't accept that we're all different, which is broadly accepted elsewhere in our culture, then we've got nothing to look forward to except endless conflict, conflagration and division, which, here's a side note, is really convenient for institutions and people in power because we'll never have the time to go, I'm going to stop looking at you. I'm going to start thinking, how is this situation benefiting people? What's really going on here?
So, if you've listened to this channel before, you know that we feel that one of the hallmarks of fascism is taking radical rhetoric and then twisting it into support for the status quo. So what Brand just said there, and many right-wing populists or fascists do that, what they try to do is to say, oh, don't look at this grassroots right-winger who is in their local community promoting all kinds of QAnon stuff and other really socially harmful things. Don't look at them. The 1% actually wants you to look at them so that you don't look at the 1%. Well, guess what? I am looking at the 1%. And then I'm looking at the little person, the puppet on a string, who is dancing to their tune and believing all the fucking QAnon bullshit where do you think that comes from? Okay? Where do you think all the anti-Muslim sentiment comes from? Where do you think all the anti-immigrant sentiment comes from? Comes from the 1%. So I'm going to both be bothered by the 1% and by the working class and petty bourgeois puppets who side with the reactionaries. That is also my concern. Don't try to fucking hide behind that because you're really just confusing people. It's not two separate issues. It's one issue. It's the 1% and the people who side with them. So it's basically the same set of interests that are at play here. The problem is a lot of these people on the ground are too either ignorant or just too dishonest to face the fact that what they're doing is not socially positive in any way. Yet that is the pretense here. Oh, we're all one, man. Can't we just come together? No, not while you're like out promoting every fucking cancerous conspiracy theory under the sun. No, I'm not going to come together with you when you're basically just serving as an agent of the 1%. No, I will not do that.
Well over 1,000 people lining the Trans-Canada Highway outside of Winnipeg in -30 wind chills, protesting what they call government overreach.
Somebody has to stand up for Canada and the truckers are doing it.
What we'll say is it was fucking cold to do it in Canada. Every single shot, people are like clinging on to life. Well done doing a truck protest in those conditions, because I don't think I'd be able to get out there. I'll be there with the old logs, building a nice fire.
Nearly $5 million has been fundraised for the convoy online by organizer Tamara Litch.
That's pretty amazing because that suggests that it is popular.
Okay, I mean, it's fairly typical for conservatives to be able to raise money. I mean, every time, somebody gets fired over some racist rant or you fucking shoot somebody, like if you're Kyle Rittenhouse, I mean, they always do a GoFundMe and they always raise a substantial amount of money. That kind of tells me more that the people backing this have money than anything else. I mean, if you look at the average contribution, it's 5 million and then like 64,000 subscribers. It comes out to like $78 average. It's not a ton, but I mean, it's not $10 or $20. I mean, actually, right in that screenshot, you can see that somebody donated $13,000. Do you have $13,000 to spend on a bunch of truckers protesting vaccine mandates? I mean, think about that. Why would somebody do that? Is it about the vaccine mandates, or is it about the general far-right convergence that's going on?
We're not talking about a minority of people. Isn't that interesting? In a sense, you can see that that's a precondition of keeping people separate, isn't it? So only a few people, some weirdos, and they're mad conspiracy theorists. Well, that don't look like a few mad conspiracy theorists. It looks like a world record-breaking convoy in the snow.
Okay, I mean, that's one way of looking at it again, or you could go to, I don't know, have there been polls done? Yes, Abacus Data polling outfit did do a poll, and they found that 32%, about 1 in 3 Canadians, felt that they had a lot in common with the convoy, while 2 out of 3 Canadians felt that the convoy did not represent their views and that the border should be closed to unvaccinated truckers. So actually, this is not really that well supported. Also, popular support in and of itself is not necessarily indicative of anything in terms of justness. People can be misinformed on issues and not be making very good decisions. People can make mistakes. Even groups of people can make mistakes, particularly if they don't have access to good information, or for example, if they're listening to right-wing radio all fucking day.
The convoy is also growing as a political issue, with some Conservative MPs expressing their support.
It's a shame, isn't it, when these issues generally get used to boost, forgive the word, the kind of agenda of opposing political parties that, really are just point scoring rather than looking at what's best for ordinary people.
Actually, I think it's russellbrand in this case who is looking the situation square in the eye and trying to deny what's there. This is a far-right issue that some of the conservatives are far enough right to be supporting. And that's basically how this video goes. There's like another 9 minutes of this left. It does not get any better. It's literally at every sentence, at every step, Brand is just distorting everything that he's talking about, just pulling it like taffy to present the convoy in the absolute rosiest possible light with zero critical analysis whatsoever. By the way, that green drink next to him, he does not sip it a single time. Don't let your fucking juice oxidize. That is fucking wasteful. A lot of wheatgrass died for that, okay?
What's the end point? The end point surely is a fairer society where more people are free, where we accept there are going to be differences, but we don't oppress and control people and we don't prevent people from protesting. When there are new laws introduced, it's like, we've got to shut down that protest, we've got to have more surveillance. Who does that benefit?
When did we start talking about this now? And can I just point out again, this is a story he's doing about a vaccine protest. He has not discussed the vaccine a single time, the fact that there's a pandemic, why, people who are opposed to the convoy might be opposed to it. He hasn't considered any of this. It's just framing it in this like kindergarten version of like, some people want to be free to do things they want, and other people don't want them to be that way. That's not what's going on here. Seriously, this guy has 5 million subscribers. It's a travesty. But, I don't know. I guess this is the kind of shit people go for on, like, Facebook and whatever other bastions of, like, backwards thinking remain in the world today. He's taken an issue and completely stripped it of context, and now we're talking about, should they be allowed to protest? That is not the issue here. Like, even the convoy is not really talking about that.
So even when you happen to agree with the position of the authoritarian state, you of course have to be aware that it might not always be that way.
Not saying everyone involved in this movement is an extremist, but are definitely trying to aim their narratives at this larger movement to try and see if they can get any traction.
As the convoy rolls on, there are concerns about some supporters' views. Online, there have been some threats of violence.
Of course there have. Slipping Lizard and Mr. Trev Lee. Again, this is how narratives are formed, isn't it? Right? You can imagine these conversations taking place. There's this popular movement, there's a popular protest against mandates. We want those mandates in place for numerous reasons, and you can speculate as to what they are. You know, some of them good health reasons, some of them because it supports the interests of the powerful, some of them because it increases government power in a general way, and governments are about control, and increasing control is a good thing for a government. How do we stop this protest from increasing in popularity and, heaven forbid, achieving its aims? Well, firstly, you have to control the story. You have to say that this is these guys. You have to depict it. Now, I'm old enough to remember when there was a lot of strong anti-immigrant propaganda in our country, England. So you would continually be bombarded with negative stories about immigrants and never think about what the conditions for being an immigrant or refugee might be. I always think if you agree with what the government is telling you and the media is telling you, have a little think first.
Okay, I am officially done with this video. There were a number of glaring fallacies in that clip. Probably the cherry on top was when the government tells you to be afraid of immigrants, like happened in England, you got to stop and think about that. Okay, except I don't know if this situation is a little too complex for you to analyze, Russell, but actually the guys you're sitting here cheering on right now as the freedom fighters, they would agree with all that stuff. And they would support the government that is putting out that propaganda, and if put in a position of power, they'd be fucking writing it themselves. This is a consequence of your brain-dead, grade school, libertarian analysis of like, some of the reasons are good and they're for health, but then other reasons are because governments want to control and, just governments want control over people. That's not actually how things work. That whole analysis, just take it, throw it right in the trash. Really, just, done. There's no class analysis in there at all. When the libertarians start coming in and just saying all government bad, government want power, that's when you got to pull the plug. The conversation's over. So we've got Brand trying to do the analysis at that level of like little guy good, government bad, can't see any of the class dynamics at play. And then ironically, like irony of ironies, he's going to sit there and be like, after all, if you agree with the government, like for example, they ran anti-immigrant. Dude, that is literally what everyone organizing this convoy believes. They all come from like fascist anti-immigrant groups. Those are their politics. Maybe there are just dimensions of this you're not seeing. Maybe you're not ready to see it yet, but please, this is why I run this channel. Go listen to the videos, maybe come back in like a year after you've had to think about it. And honestly, just drink your juice and put a sock in it because just enough. So anyway, yeah, the video does go on for several more minutes. That for me was the official cutoff point. This video is also long enough. It's about an hour long. So what do you think? Was this informative, helpful? Do you have questions, comments, etc.? Are you a Russell Brand fan coming on just to bash? Don't bother. I'll just delete your comment. Anyway, I guess that makes me the fascist because I'm censoring you and it's all about control. No. You really have a lot to learn if you're still thinking on that level. I was once like you. I once thought like that. And then I learned how to actually think about society. That's not going to cut it. You really got to do better. The people running society are many steps ahead of you. You can't just keep talking in these buzzwords and shibboleths that maybe help you feel like you're part of some movement. Really, though, you're getting led around by the nose by the big bourgeoisie, the big capitalists. That's what's going on. That's what fascism's all about. It's not anti-establishment. You might think that at first. Being conservative is not anti-establishment. It might seem like you're going against the grain and ruffling some feathers. You're just kind of pissing people off to no constructive purpose. Just because you kind of can't function in the modern world. But that's on you. I mean, there's people, like, you can definitely get caught up. You don't have to stay that way forever. You really can. You don't have to feel so angry and hateful. You don't have to feel that way. You can get caught up. You can get educated. You can actually learn to function in this world. It doesn't have to be like this forever. You don't have to join the angry trucker protest just to feel connected to something. You don't have to join up with the Western separatists who believe that political Islam is the greatest threat to the West and all other kinds of shit that, speaking of, trying to keep people divided and like keeping people looking away from the class conflict, which is actually central to capitalism. Yeah, try looking at that instead. We'll help you out. That's what this channel is here for. All right. Questions, comments, leave them in the comments area below. We'll continue the discussion. I always appreciate sincere and politely worded questions. They help me to learn a lot, and sometimes I get great new ideas for other videos out of them, so comments are appreciated. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialism for all. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month. Every donation is encouraging. They're also financially helpful, as I do spend a lot of time producing these videos. Otherwise, if you'd like to help out without making a financial contribution, liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a comment, even if it's just a good video or thanks, all of that helps to boost the channel, helps more people to see the content, and expands the audience. The channel has been growing, and I really appreciate everything that everybody's been doing to spread it to a bigger and bigger audience. We do need to discuss these issues, and again, if you're listening to the Russell Brands, you're not getting the kind of analysis that's going to get you anywhere. Out in the real world, join an organization, because all the agitation and education online in the world, valuable though it may be, is not going to translate directly into real world action. We got to get organized for that. Otherwise, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next video.